Hi there. Today we're going to talk about subtraction, specifically subtraction where you borrow across zeros. Now, in order for you to subtract at any time, you have to understand that you can't take a bigger number from a smaller number. When you have a situation where your bottom number is larger than your top number, you have to borrow. Now, when you borrow in subtraction, remember, you only change two places at a time. The first place has to get smaller. You're borrowing from it, so the number you have there is going to get smaller. The next place will get larger because you've taken from one and you're adding 10 to that place. Okay? One place has to get smaller so the other can get larger. If my buddy and I are in line to buy hot dogs, and he gets to the checkout and he has no money, he's going to turn to me and he says, "Hey, can I borrow some money?" He has no money until I give it to him. Okay? My amount of money has to get smaller so that his amount of money can get larger. That's the way borrowing works. One has to get smaller so the other can get larger. Now let's use that idea and let's talk about subtraction with zeros. Okay? The first thing you have to do when you are doing any subtraction is look at the first place or the place you're working on and ask yourself a simple question. And here it is. The question is, can I subtract? Can I subtract? Now, I don't mean, are you mentally able? What I mean is, in that place, can you do the subtraction? Is the top number the same or greater than the bottom number? So, in the ones place here, I have a 0 and a 7. Can I subtract? Well, the answer is no, I can't. So I have to borrow. Now, for the ones place, in order for me to borrow, I have to borrow from the tens place. But I have none. So now I have to know that in order for me to get tens, I've got to go to the hundreds. I've got to borrow from there so that so the tens place can have some numbers, and then borrow from it. Well, when I go to the hundreds place, there's nothing there either. So the first thing I'm going to do this problem is I'm going to have to get some hundreds, and the place I'm going to get that from is the thousands place. Now remember, we may do a lot of borrowing here, but we're going to change two places at a time. First place smaller, next place larger, and then you start it all over again. So I'm going to come all the way out here to the thousands place, and I'm going to borrow from it so I can get some hundreds. So this 5 is going to get smaller. It's going to be a 4. The 0 next to the hundreds place now gets larger. 0 plus, remember, anytime you're bringing numbers over to make it larger, it's going to be adding 10. So 0 plus 10 is 10. Now, notice, the ones place hasn't changed. The tens place hasn't changed. And they won't change till I borrow for them. Now, I still have no ones. I still can't subtract. I still can't borrow here, but now I can borrow from that 10. So I'm going to borrow from the 10. 10 gets smaller, so it's a 9. And this 0 now in the tens place gets larger, and it's 10. But I still can't subtract in the ones place, because I haven't borrowed for it yet. Remember, we're going to change two places at a time. Well, now I can finally borrow from that tens place. So I'm going to borrow from the tens. It's a 9, because it gets smaller. The 0 becomes larger. It's a 10. 10 minus 7, now I can go ahead and do all my subtraction. I can subtract now. 10 minus 7 is 7. 9 minus 4 is 5. 9 minus 3 is 6. 4 minus 2 is 2. Now, let's take a look at two examples. Let's do these together, and then I'm going to give you a couple to try on your own. Let's start with this one. 3,000 minus 1,652. The first thing I want to do, look in that ones place and ask my question, can I subtract? No, I have 0 and I'm trying to take 2 from it. It doesn't work. I've got to do some borrowing. I can't borrow here. I can't borrow here. I can borrow here, so I've got to get some hundreds first. So remember, we changed two places at a time. First place smaller, next place larger. Borrow from the 3, that gets smaller, it's 2. The 0 gets larger, it's 10. Okay? I still have no 10s, still have no 1s. I'm back in the tens place. I want to borrow from the hundreds. It gets smaller. Tens place gets larger. It's 10. Now I still have no ones. I've got to borrow again. Borrow from the 10. It gets smaller. The ones gets larger. And now I have a 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. 9 minus 5 is 4. 9 minus 6 is 3. And 2 minus 1 is 1. And I get 1,348. If I wanted to check those, I would add those two numbers together and see if it gave me my original 3,000. Now, please, 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 don't get in the habit of looking at a number and seeing all those zeros and going, oh boy, wham, 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 10, 9, 10, 9, 10, 9, 10, 9. Don't do it, because what you're going to get is a situation like the next problem over there. In letter B, I have 2,000 minus 670. Look at the ones place. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I've had students, when we do this in class, they'll get to this problem and they'll cross out all their numbers and they'll go 1, 10, 9, 10, 9, 10. And then they go to subtract and say, Mr. Carey, 10 minus 0 is 10 and I can't put it here. It's because they shouldn't have borrowed. They didn't ask the question. Remember, in the ones place, what's our question? Can I subtract? 0 minus 0. Can you do that? Certainly you can. I have no money. Can you take no money? Sure. 0 minus 0. It's 0. And we didn't need to do any borrowing. So don't. Only borrow when you need to. Okay? Now, in the tens place, I have 0 and I'm trying to take 7. Can I subtract? No. Now I have to borrow. So now I'm going to come over here. I can't borrow from this 0. I have to borrow from the 2. It gets smaller. This gets larger. It's 10. Now, I still have no tens. I've got to borrow from that hundreds place. This gets smaller. This gets larger. Do not change it to a 9 because you don't need to. Now, can I subtract 10 minus 7? Yes, I can. It's a 3. 9 minus 6. It's 3. 1 minus 0 is 1. And I get 1,330. Now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and push the pause button. I'll pause the video. And I want you to try C and D. Remember, ask yourself, can I subtract? You only borrow if the answer is no. Okay? If you can't subtract, then you've got to borrow. And remember, when you're borrowing, you change 2 places at a time. The first place gets smaller, next place gets larger, and that's it. All right, go ahead and pause it. Give these two a shot. Give them a try. Do your best. Go ahead. I'll wait. All right. Did you try them? Were you careful? Let's see. Let's start with letter C here. I'm going to start in the ones place. 3 minus 2. Can I subtract? Yes. 3 is bigger than 2. And the answer there is 1. Tens place, I have 6 minus 9. Can I subtract? No. Can I borrow with a 0? No. I've got to borrow across the 0. So I've got to come all the way over here to the 5 and work my way across. I'm going to borrow from 5. It gets smaller, so the 0 can get larger. The 0 is going to be 10. I still can't do 6 minus 9. I have to borrow again. From the 10, making it smaller, borrowing from it. That's 9. The 6 is 16, and now I can subtract. 16 minus 9 is 7. 9 minus 7 is 2. And 4 minus 3 is 1. 1,271. Did you get it? I know you did. Let's take a look at letter D. In letter D, we have 4,008 minus 1,065. In the ones place, 8 minus 5. Ask my question, can I subtract? Can you? No, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It helps if I pay attention. 8 minus 5 is going to be 3. Now in the tens place, I have 0 minus 6. Now can you subtract? The answer is no. Again, we're coming over to borrow from the hundreds place. Nothing there. We've got to come all the way to the thousands place and regroup our way back. We're going to borrow from the 4. It gets smaller, so the hundreds get larger. The thousands place becomes 3. That 0 becomes 10. I still can't subtract in the tens place. I've got to borrow from the hundreds. It becomes 9. It gets smaller, so the tens place can get larger. This is 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 0 is 9. And 3 minus 1 is 2. We get 2,943. Remember that when you're borrowing at any time, or when you're doing subtraction, no matter what the numbers are, ask yourself, can I subtract? If the answer is no, then you have to regroup. When you're regrouping and borrowing, you have to remember you change 2 places at a time. You can't just whack, 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 whack and change all the numbers at once. I know it would be nice to go that fast, but that's when mistakes happen. Take your time, 1 place at a time. Borrow, it gets smaller. Regroup, it gets larger. Okay? Go ahead and click on the link. There's more practice problems for you to do, or if you're in class, your teacher may give you some different problems to do right now. Okay? In any case, when you're in school, pay attention, work hard, and I'll see you next time.